So what do we need for the sprint? We first need to press a button and do the sprint, right? So let's set the input. We will go to settings, we will go to project settings, and here we have inputs in engine, and we need an action mapping. The difference between these is that the action mappings just know if your button is pressed or released, and axis mapping can give you a float value depending on the state of the button. We just need to know if it's pressed or not. So let's add an action mapping here. I'm gonna call it sprint, and I'm gonna select a key value and press left shift. So now we have a button that does exactly what we want to do. Let's open our character, and yeah, it's this one. Here in the world settings, if there is no game mode, it means that in our project settings we set the game mode here in maps and modes, so we can find it here on default game mode. So let's search it, and it's right here. This is our game mode. I'm looking for the game mode because I don't remember what the default bound class is. Here it is, first person character. Let's search again, and here we have all the functionality to fire and, well, to attach the gun and create the gun. So just like we jump, we need to create a sprint mechanic. Well, an sprint is just a way of modifying the current speed of my character, so it's really simple. We can make it really simple. Just right click, input action, or I can press sprint, and here is my action event. Now we need to change the speed. If we're using a character, which in our case we are, you can find it here, parent class character. Then you can go here to the character movement component, and here we will have a max walk speed. If we change this to, I don't know, a high value like 3000, we can play, and let me pop up the window, and we will reach higher speeds because that's the way that component is made. So we just need to change that value. So max walk speed is the value we want to change. Let me return it to our default one. And so when I press sprint, let's change. Let's drag and drop the component, and let's set the max walk speed. And when I press it, I want it to be like up high enough value so I can notice it for now, then I can tweak it later. And when I release it, I want it to be a default value. I can copy and paste this. I want it to be the default value that was 600. So let's test it. Play. And I press shift, and I start moving faster. I release shift, and we return to our default speed. So really simple, right? So here,
yeah, that one looks like you're using like a hover shoes. It's like just sliding, but the logic is there.
yeah, we now can tweak the values and get it where we want it to be, right? So having random values in our code is really not a good practice, because let's say we return to this project like in 2 months. I will not know exactly why I put this here, why I put this number, or what is this number even meaning. So we need to make it to variables so it's easier for us to understand later. This one is the default walk speed, so let's call it that. Default max walk speed. And I mistype the code. And this is the sprinting one, so let's call it like that also. So now it's really clear that we can give this blueprint to a game designer, and he or she can tweak these values default, and that person will not have to look around or search for these nodes. That it's cool if that person knows how to work with blueprints, but it will be easier for the designers to just go to the class defaults and find it. Oh, we have, let me compile. We have a default max walk speed and a sprint max walk speed. And it's easier to change it that way than going through all the nodes and searching. Now, we need the animation, right? And before doing the animation, we were talking about good practices. In my case, and this is a type of preference, I like to keep the inputs very simple like this, like jump or stop jumping, instead of having all the code near the input. So I will make a custom event really quickly that says start sprinting, and one that is called stop sprinting. And I will reconnect my nodes like this. And I'm gonna copy and paste this component just to be more independent between these two events. So now I can move these events here, where I have a lot more space, and I can put my input action of a sprint. Let's call it start sprinting. And when I release, I want to stop sprinting. Great. Now it's working exactly the same. So let's change the animation. It will be good for us if we have a way here to know if it's sprinting or not. We just don't want to check the value, this value, because our max walk speed could change for any other reason, right? So it's good to create a variable so we can store this state. Let's call it is sprinting. And whenever we start the sprinting, let's put it to true. And whenever we stop, let's change it to false. Perfect. Now we can start changing the animation. We will need to work with the animation blueprint. In order to find which animation blueprint this character is using, just click on the skeletal mesh, and you can find it here in the category of animation. First person animation blueprint, let's find it. And here it is. If you have never worked with an animation blueprint, you just need to know that the animation blueprints have two important tabs. One is the event graph, where we will get all the information of our character. For example, we are getting if it's in air and if it's moving, so we can change the animation depending on these states. And then we have the animation graph, and in this graph, what we're doing is setting up the animations based on the states of the of the variables that we got previously. In this case, we're using a state machine. We can double click the state machine. And here we have declared all the states that our character could have. So we have an idle, a run, animate and run state, jump start, jump loop, and jump end. This state changes depending on these movement rules. For example, here, if I double click, it's asking if it's moving. So if I'm moving, and that variable is being set up in the event graph here, depending on the velocity. So if I'm moving, let's press play. And let me, here it is. Oh, it's not detecting my character, so I can choose this one here, spawn. So this graph can light up. Here it is. So when I move, it changes the state. If I jump, it goes to a jump start, jump loop, and jump end. So that's great. It's working properly. Here we could add a state for it to go to a sprint, but because we want the animation to be smooth, we want it to do a blend between the run and the sprint. First, let's create the sprint animation. Let's just double click on the run, and we will use this as a base animation. Now, it will be good for us to add the weapon so we know what's happening. So let's go to the skeleton tree here, and this character that came with the first person shooter example had a socket that you can create by, I don't know, go hand, right click, and add a socket here, and you can move it around. But if you already have a socket, then you can right click it, add preview asset, and let's find our gun. Here it is. So now we know what's happening better. Now, when we're sprinting, we do not want to have our gun going forward, right? We want it to be rotated to one side. So let's do that. We would need to modify, and here in the skeleton tree, you can find the hand. And if we want to add some animation, we can add a key. So let's stop the animation. Let's go to a first frame, and then we can key it with our hand selected. Let me press key. And now I can rotate it like this and key it again just to be sure that the change has been made. So now that we have rotated that bone, if we press play, then it's a little better. Now, maybe it's too near my body, so I won't see it. So let me tweak the lower arm also. Let's go to a first frame, key it, and move it just a little bit, and key again. And let me fix a little bit of the arm. Yeah, now it should be better. And we can also fix this part of the arm, the left arm. So let's go to the left arm. This is the right one. We don't want to mess too much with the clavicle. The upper arm. Oh, and I forgot to key this. Yeah, a little key there. Key again, and the lower arm also. This is a little bit tedious, but it will give us a better effect. Key it here.
We'll remove the snapping too.
Yeah, but
be less painful.
Yeah, that's true. So it doesn't snap like this, but I believe that it gave us like the correct locations for now. Our camera would not be able to see this, probably, so I'm gonna leave it like this. We can fine-tune it later. But yeah, if you want to remove the snapping because animating with a snap is really troublesome, you can do it here for the movement, and for rotation you can disable it right here, so you have a lot more freedom, and that's even better actually. So yeah, good point. So we won't be able to see this animation even though we have modified a first person run. If we try to see it here in my game, we won't be able to see it. If we wanted to use this as an additive animation, because we are creating additive layer tracks, we would need here to, in asset details, instead of no additive, in additive settings, we would need to change it to local space or mesh space. But in my case, I want this to be an other animation. So here I can create an asset, create animation, current animation, and preview mesh. So it's getting all the current animation. And let me save it. Where's my character, mesh, textures, material, animations. And I believe all my animations were called, let me call it a sprint, then we can rename it to the proper name. So we have created the sprint here. I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna go to the animation blueprint and I'm gonna test it. Here in the asset browser, sprint, let me replace the run like this, compile, save. Let me press Alt P so we can play. And now we have the sprint animation. Yeah, so it's working. But what I would like to do is blend these two animations. So what I'm gonna do is create a little thing called a blend space. And this transposing the gun, this is a bug. Yeah, it's a bug. As I said, you could fix it later in the animation. So yeah, let's not worry too much about it. So everything is called first person underscore run. Well, underscore the action. So let's call our sprint that. And we want to create a blend between the run and the sprint. So let's create what it's called a blend space. We can right click here, animation, and I just need to do a blend space in one dimension because it's gonna be really simple. So let's choose blend space 1D. Let's choose our character that it's, yeah, it should be arms skeleton. And let's open the blend space that we just created. Let's call it BS for blend space. And it should be run sprint. Let's double click the blend space, and here I'm gonna need to select the animations we want to blend, and it can be more than two, but in our case I'll show you how to blend between a run and a sprint. So here we have the run. Let's drag and drop it to the start. Now we have the run animation, and now we have the sprint. Let's drag and drop it to the end. So now we haven't seen any change, but here we see that it says hold shift to move the preview point. Let's hold shift. And now my preview point can change between, currently is the value of 0 and 100, but if this value moves gradually, then the animation is blending to the sprint one. Now we're in a sprint. And we can see the blend easier if I move it quickly. So now we need to use this asset. So first we have to tweak a little bit of the settings here in this asset. I really don't want it to be like from 0 to 100 because I do not know what it really means, like what's 100. So let's keep it simple. Here I will change in the axis settings. 0, it's okay for a start, and 1 should be my new value. Instead of having none here, I will call this an alpha, because we just need to change between 0 and 1 in order for this asset to change. Great. So now I can save this asset, and now I can go back to the animation blueprint, and instead of having these two values, I can use a blend space here. And just as a small caveat, we could also blend, we can blend animations here, blend, and we can do an alpha and it will be almost the same, but if you wanted to add an state, then you would need to blend again, like do something like this. So it's easier to manage everything in a blend space. So that's why I have done it this way, even though we're using only 2 animations. So yeah, now the run sprint is being controlled by this alpha. So if we compile and this alpha changes, then it would change my animation. We need this to be a variable because we do not want it to be always the same value. So let's right click it, promote to a variable, and let's call it sprint alpha. Now this is the value that I will need to change, and I need to change it in the event graph. So somewhere here I should set up that value, something like this, sprint alpha, and we set the value here. We need to get that value from the character, so let's go to the character, and in the event graph I had these values. I need that to create that alpha value in order for my animation blueprint to use it. So let's create a timeline here so we can have more control of the change in the animation. So let's right click, timeline, and I'm gonna call it the sprint. When I start sprinting, I want it to play, and when I stop sprinting, I want it to reverse. So my timeline is gonna drive that alpha value, and I should create that value like variables sprint alpha, and I'm gonna set it to float. Now with my timeline I can choose to create curves that can help me drive any value. So let's double click it, create a float track, and this will change any value, well, any float value I want. This track, I'm gonna call it sprint alpha, and I'm gonna create the keys. I can right click it and add a key. In the start I want it to be 0 and the value also 0, and I'm gonna change the length to 1, and I can also shift click inside this to create a key. So when time is 1, I want the value to be 1. So now I have my curve. If I needed more functionality, more control, I can right click and change the curve, change the tangents. But for now, yeah, this looks like a good curve, so let's keep it like this. Let's compile, save, and go back to my event graph. Now I have this sprint alpha, And now I can change this sprint alpha value in the update node. This update will start running whenever we press play and whenever we press reverse. So this sprint alpha value should change like this. Now we need to connect this sprint alpha with the sprint alpha of the first person animations. First, let's compile and save here in my first person character. And now let's use this node try get pawn owner. This will try to get the pawn that contains this animation blueprint. In our case, this first person character has this skeletal mesh, and this skeletal mesh has the animation blueprint. So when it tries to get the owner pawn, then it's getting this blueprint, this first person character blueprint. Now we need to cast it to our first person character.
I'm getting it. Believe it or not.
Excuse me?
I'm getting it. After so many times watching blueprints, I'm starting to get the hang out of it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We can get, now that we have cast this class, that because this is just a pawn object, this class does not know about our sprint value. So after casting it, we can ask about the sprint alpha, and it can be get, and we can set the sprint alpha inside this blueprint. So now let's check if it's working correctly. Let's press play. I'm moving without sprinting. If I press sprint, then it's gradually changing to my sprint. It's a little slow right now, so let's fix it a little bit. I created this timeline. We can move the values here, but we would need to change it every time we want to tweak it. And I do not like to change my timelines too much. So we can modify the play rate. Let's get the component. I double click the component, I'm sorry. Just drag and drop it, get. And at the start the sprinting, we can change the play rate. Set play rate. And we can create a variable for this. Right click it, promote to variable, sprint alpha play rate. And now let's set it to, I don't know, maybe 7 can be quick enough. Let's press shift, maybe too quick. 5. Yeah, that's better. Any questions thus far?
Not so far, but Rizzo Gaming was asking like if this logic also works for a third-person shooter, which I believe it is, but I would like to know your answer.
Yeah, it should be exactly the same. The third person would probably use a character component, and that's what we're using to change the speed and everything else we have created along the way. So you can also use it. And the animations, yeah, it should be also the same. Instead of having the camera like near our gun, it shouldn't matter that it's floating around. So now let's, I mean, we have the sprint mechanic, but maybe we're not feeling like we're sprinting. We're feeling that we're just going fast, right? So let's polish it a little bit. Let's add a little camera shake. So first we need to create a camera shake asset. Let's here, content drawer. And I do believe we created a folder for our project. Here I'm gonna create a folder called camera shakes. I don't know if we will use more than one, but just in case. Camera shakes, right click, blueprint class, and in all classes we can find the camera shake base class. Camera shake source, no, we do not need that. Camera shake base. Select, and let's call it something like CS for camera shake. And a sprint. Let's double click it, and we will have a lot of types of camera shake. First, it's asking me if I only want a single instance of it. So maybe this would probably be good if, for example, every time something explodes, you want to shake the camera, but maybe you only want one of these camera shakes so they don't mix. So you can check here the single instance. For now, let's leave it like this. We do not have to worry too much about it. And here in the root shake pattern, we have a lot of patterns. If we want to mix camera shakes, we can use the composite. If we want to make the camera shake through a matinee, you can also do it. Perlin noise, sequence camera shake, but the wave oscillator is the classic one. So we have a location if you want to shake the camera in a location. If you want to rotate it, you can also do it from here. You can change the FOV and the timing. In our case, let's just change the location. I'm gonna put it like maybe 3 on location amplitude, and a frequency multiplier for now. Let's keep it in 1. The duration I'm gonna, for now, let's put it 5. Save it, compile, and now we want to use this, and then we can explain the amplitude and frequency. Let's first know that it's working. Let me close this blend space and the animation blueprint. I don't need it also. So first person character we have here. We want to start shaking the camera whenever we start sprinting, and we need to stop shaking it whenever we stop. So this would be a good time to start shaking the camera. To add camera shake, you just need to right click and get the camera manager. Get player camera manager. You can get it like this. Get player index, or if you'd like, you can also get it like this. Get controller, and then cast it to player controller. And here you should have the player camera manager. Get player camera manager. These are 2 ways of handling this. This will be useful if you are doing a multiplayer game, but that is a split screen. And this will be useful if you're doing any other type of game. Single player will work okay, and multiplayer games, online multiplayer games, will also work okay because the player index will be always 0 unless you're using a split screen. So let's use the not complicated one. And here I can do a start camera shake.
On a side note, I think split screen double camera shake will be chaotic.
Yeah. it can be. Start camera shake, and here in the get, I'm gonna press stop camera shake. Now I'm gonna put these values like this. I'm gonna clean the nodes later, so don't be scared. Reverse. And here we need a shake class. We just created a shake class. Camera shake sprint. We can change the scale if we need it to. And here in stop camera shake, we need to select which asset we want to stop. This is an object reference, so we need to pass it this camera shake. Here is returning the object created, so let's promote it to a variable and call it sprint camera shake ref. And we have it like this. And here in the stop camera shake, we can pass it the reference. So it's working properly. Now let's see if it's working really properly. Let's save it, compile, play, and whenever we sprint, well, the camera is moving. So it's working. The thing about it is it's stopping immediately, and it will be really apparent if I crank up the values. So if I stop sprinting, it's doing that snap, and that snap is not good. So let's uncheck immediately. Play, and it's a lot smoother. With, well, I do not want the value to move in X. So here in X, I'm gonna set the amplitude to 0, and let's explain some of it. Because we're using a wave oscillator, it means that we are using a little thing called a sine wave, that it should look something like this. So our waves start and then go up and down and like that forever. This would be a value of 1. This should be a value of -1. The amplitude will be how high is going, right? This is a multiplier, so it's always gonna be 1. But if the multiplier is 10, then this curve is getting bigger, a lot bigger. And the frequency will be how frequent the wave will change. So instead of being, for example, this could be 1. If we have a higher value, then our frequency will be higher. So it's gonna be something like this, and with one color is really not understandable. It would be something like this. So that's what I'm modifying here, the amplitude and the multiplier. So let's change the multiplier to 5, play, and the camera shake should be a lot more harsh. Let's put 3. Maybe 5 is too much. Let's go 3 and 3. Yeah, that seems better. So if I'm walking and I'm pressing the camera shake, then it's moving a lot more. It's moving around a lot more. And let's tweak some values. Maybe why I do not want the full 3. I just want the half of it. So now it's jumping a lot more in the C value, that it can be up and down. And you can see that if I'm still sprinting, the camera shake ends. So here in the duration, it says 0 or less means infinite. So let's put it 0 or less. Let's put it -1. But whenever we play, the camera shake stops immediately So it's not working in Unreal Engine 5. So let's, instead of the duration being too low, let's maybe put it like 6 minutes or 10 minutes. You won't probably sprint 10 minutes, so the camera shake will still work. So now we have this cool looking sprinting. And yes, the arm is passing through. So yeah, what can we do? Oh, and we can also tweak the blend in and blend out. The blend out, I want it to be a little more faster, so it ends faster. So that's great. Perfect.
Nice. It really feels like sprinting now after the camera shake.
Yeah, it adds a lot of it.
I mean, we added the logic long time ago. Technically, we're running faster, but it's very important to make all these little details like the animation and then the camera shake to actually feel that you're running. It's just not a matter of adding the code and you run faster and that's it. Otherwise, it will feel so strange.
Yeah, and it remembers well, it reminds me of a saying that I'm not sure if I can translate it correctly, that if you're a good guy, you don't just have to be a good guy, you need to look like a good guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, even though everything is working properly, if you don't add that little spiciness of the camera shake or some other, we could press if we added some particle effects, like we're going faster, like those lines that you find in a lot of action movies or action
Oh, nice.
animes or cartoons. Yeah, that helps a lot also.